The autumn rain fell steady on the streets of Riverside, a quiet town in northern Virginia where nothing much ever happened. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where the biggest news was usually about high school football games or who won the pie contest at the county fair. But on this particular October evening, something different was brewing outside Murphy's Diner on Main Street. Sarah Mitchell sat alone in a corner booth, her coffee growing cold as she stared at the paperwork spread before her. At 28, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that most people mistook for coldness. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a worn navy jacket, the only thing she had left from her father, who'd served 30 years before passing away 2 years ago. Sarah had recently returned to Riverside after 6 years in the Army. She'd served as a combat medic in Afghanistan, seen things that still woke her at 3 in the morning, saved lives that she carried with her like precious stones. But none of that mattered here. To the people of Riverside, she was just Tom Mitchell's daughter who'd come back different, quieter, harder somehow. She gathered her papers, discharge documents, medical bills from her mother's treatment, loan applications that kept getting denied. Her mother's cancer had come back, aggressive and unforgiving, and the treatments weren't covered by insurance. Sarah was working 3 jobs, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. As she stepped outside into the rain, she heard it, a woman's voice sharp with fear. "Stop it, let me go." Sarah's training kicked in before her mind could catch up. She moved toward the sound, her boots splashing through puddles in the alley beside the diner. There, pressed against the brick wall, was a young woman in an expensive dress, her makeup running with tears. A man, tall, athletic, wearing a designer jacket, had her wrist gripped tight. "I said we're leaving," the man growled. "You're embarrassing me, Chelsea." "Please, Tyler, you're hurting me." Sarah's voice cut through the rain, steady and calm. "Let her go." Tyler spun around, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. Even in the dim light from the street lamp, Sarah could see the entitlement written across his features. This was Tyler Harrington III, son of the town's wealthiest family. His father owned half the businesses in Riverside and had the mayor in his pocket. "Mind your business," Tyler snarled. "This is between me and my girlfriend." Sarah took a step closer, her hands relaxed at her sides, her body language non-threatening but ready. She'd learned how to read situations in places where a wrong move meant death. This wasn't that, but it still mattered. "The lady asked you to let go," Sarah said quietly, "so let go." Chelsea's eyes met Sarah's, pleading and frightened. Tyler's grip tightened, making Chelsea wince. Sarah moved faster than Tyler could track. Years of hand-to-hand combat training made her movements fluid and precise. She stepped in, applied pressure to a nerve cluster in Tyler's wrist, and his hand released Chelsea's arm instantly. He stumbled back, more from shock than pain. You touched me." Tyler's face went from red to purple. "You assaulted me." Chelsea had already moved behind Sarah, rubbing her wrist. "She was helping me. Tyler, you were drunk and angry, you hurt." "Shut up, Chelsea." Tyler pulled out his phone, his hands shaking with rage. "I'm calling the police. This psycho attacked me." Sarah remained calm, though her heart was pounding. "I didn't attack anyone. I helped someone who was being hurt." "That's not what happened," Tyler said, his voice taking on a calculated edge. He was thinking now, scheming. "I was trying to help my girlfriend into my car because she'd had too much to drink, and you came out of nowhere and grabbed me. You assaulted me without provocation." "That's not true," Chelsea protested, but there was already fear in her voice. Fear of Tyler, of his family, of what would happen if she contradicted him. Within minutes, red and blue lights painted the wet alley. 2 officers stepped out of the patrol car, and Sarah's stomach sank when she recognized them. Officers Brad Morrison and Jake Peters. Both had gone to high school with Tyler. Both came from families that owed their livelihoods to the Harringtons. "Tyler, you okay?" Officer Morrison asked, not even glancing at Sarah or Chelsea. "I want her arrested," Tyler said, pointing at Sarah. "She attacked me, grabbed me and twisted my arm. Chelsea saw the whole thing, didn't you, baby?" Chelsea's eyes darted between Tyler and Sarah. Sarah could see it happening, could see the young woman crumbling under the weight of Tyler's expectation and his family's power. I don't know," Chelsea whispered. "It happened so fast." "She's obviously confused," Tyler said smoothly. "She's been drinking, but I." "Now what happened? That woman assaulted me and I want to press charges." Officer Peters finally looked at Sarah. Ma'am, is this true? Did you put your hands on Mr. Harrington? Sarah kept her voice level. I intervened when I saw him hurting his girlfriend. I used minimal force to. So you admit you touched him, Morrison interrupted. Mr. Harrington, do you want to press charges for assault? Absolutely. Sarah felt the handcuffs click around her wrists, cold and tight. This wasn't right. Nothing about this was right. But she'd learned in the army that sometimes the right thing and the legal thing weren't the same, and sometimes good people got caught in between. You have the right to remain silent, Peters began. But Sarah had already gone quiet, already retreating into that calm place she'd found in Afghanistan when the mortars were falling, and there was nothing to do but wait and survive. As they put her in the back of the patrol car, Sarah saw a figure across the street, standing in the shadows beneath an awning, watching. A tall man with a lean, powerful build and eyes that seemed to see everything. Beside him sat a large German shepherd, perfectly still, its dark eyes fixed on the scene with an intelligence that seemed almost human. The man made no move to intervene, but something in his posture, the way he held himself, the way he assessed the situation, told Sarah he was military. You could always tell. It was in the bearing, the watchfulness, the coiled readiness. For just a moment, their eyes met through the rain-streaked window. Then the patrol car pulled away, and the man and his dog disappeared into the night. Sarah sat in the back of that car, her hands cuffed behind her, her wet clothes clinging to her skin, and thought about her mother lying in a hospital bed 20 miles away, about the bills she couldn't pay, about the jobs she'd lose when this got out. She thought about 6 years of service, of honorable discharge, of saving lives in the desert while people like Tyler Harrington partied through college on daddy's money. She'd survived firefights and IED blasts. She'd held dying soldiers in her arms and whispered prayers she didn't believe in because they needed to hear something hopeful in their last moments. She'd earned medals she kept in a drawer because they felt like weights rather than honors. And now she was going to jail because she'd helped someone. The rain kept falling as they drove to the county lockup, and Sarah kept her eyes forward, her breathing steady, her mind already working on the next step. She'd been in worse situations. She'd get through this. She had to. Her mother was counting on her. But as the booking process began, as they took her fingerprints and her mugshot, as they led her to a holding cell, Sarah felt something she'd managed to avoid for all her years of service, through all the hardship and loss. She felt defeated. The cell door clanged shut with a finality that echoed in her chest. Through the small window, she could see the night sky, clouds still heavy with rain. Somewhere out there, Tyler Harrington was probably celebrating with his friends, laughing about the nobody veteran who tried to stand up to him. Somewhere out there, Chelsea was probably crying, hating herself for not speaking up but too afraid to do anything about it. And somewhere out there, a man and his dog stood in the rain, watching, waiting, understanding more than anyone knew. Sarah sat on the hard bench in her cell and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she'd call a lawyer she couldn't afford. Tomorrow, she'd face charges that could ruin what was left of her life. Tomorrow, she'd have to tell her dying mother that she'd been arrested. But tonight, in this moment, she let herself feel the full weight of the injustice pressing down on her shoulders. Just for a moment, in the privacy of this cell, she let a single tear slip down her cheek. Then she wiped it away, straightened her shoulders, and began to plan. Because Sarah Mitchell hadn't survived Afghanistan to be broken by Tyler Harrington and his dirty money. She'd find a way through this. She always did. James Reeves sat in his truck across from the county jail, rain drumming on the roof, his K9 partner Ajax sitting alert in the passenger seat. The German shepherd's ears were perked forward, his dark eyes watching the building as if he could see through the walls to the woman inside. Easy boy, James murmured, scratching behind Ajax's ears. We wait. James had been back stateside for 8 months now, after 15 years as a Navy SEAL. He'd done 6 deployments, more missions than he could count, earned commendations he never talked about. But it was the last mission, the one that had ended with Ajax's previous handler dying in his arms, that had brought him to this quiet corner of Virginia, trying to find some kind of peace in a world that suddenly felt too loud and too quiet all at once. He'd seen what happened outside Murphy's Diner. He'd been there for the weekly meeting of the local veterans support group, held in the back room every Thursday night. He'd stepped out for some air just as Tyler Harrington had cornered that young woman in the alley. James had watched the whole thing unfold. He'd seen Sarah Mitchell, though he didn't know her name yet, handle the situation with textbook precision. Minimal force, maximum effectiveness, protecting the victim. It was how you were supposed to do it. Then he'd watched it all get twisted into something ugly. He'd almost intervened right then, almost stepped forward to give his account as a witness. But 15 years of operating in the shadows had taught him patience, had taught him that sometimes the best way to help was to watch and wait and gather information before making a move. So he'd watched them take Sarah away, then he'd made some calls. His phone buzzed, a text from an old friend who now worked at the FBI field office in Richmond. Got what you asked for. Mitchell Sarah Ann, Army 6 years, combat medic, honorable discharge, 2 Bronze Stars, Purple Heart. Father was Navy, died 2023. Mother terminal cancer, experimental treatment. 3 jobs, drowning in debt. Clean record until tonight. You picking up strays again, Reeves. James smiled grimly. Ajax let out a low woof as if agreeing with the assessment. Yeah, buddy, James said. I think I am. He made another call, this one to a lawyer he'd worked with before, a former JAG officer who specialized in cases like this. Within an hour, Sarah Mitchell had representation she didn't know about yet and couldn't have afforded if she did. Then James did what he did best. He gathered intelligence. Tyler Harrington III was exactly what he appeared to be, a spoiled rich kid who'd skated through life on daddy's money and connections. 3 prior complaints from women, all dismissed. 2 DUIs, both buried. A pattern of behavior that screamed predator, protected by wealth and privilege. The girlfriend, Chelsea Morrison, was the daughter of the chief of police. That explained a lot. Her father wouldn't want his daughter's name dragged through a scandal, wouldn't want it known that she'd been dating a man who hurt her. Easier to let the assault charge against Sarah Mitchell stand, to sweep it all under the rug. James had seen this kind of corruption before, in places far from home where warlords ruled and justice was whatever you could buy. But he'd thought, maybe naively, that it would be different here, in small-town America, in a place where they hung flags from their porches and thanked veterans for their service. He'd been wrong before, he was wrong now. Ajax shifted in his seat, pressing his nose against the window. The dog had been trained to detect explosives, to track targets across hostile terrain, to protect his handler with his life. But Ajax had always been more than just a tool. He understood things, felt things, in ways that went beyond his training. Right now, Ajax sensed injustice, and he didn't like it. Me neither, boy, James said. Me neither. Inside the jail, Sarah stood before a judge via video arraignment at 8 the next morning. She'd spent a sleepless night in the holding cell, her mind cycling through everything that could go wrong, everything she stood to lose. The charges were read, simple assault. The prosecutor, a young man who looked fresh out of law school and eager to please, requested bail be set at $10,000, citing Sarah's violent military background as a flight risk despite her clean record. Sarah's court-appointed attorney, a tired-looking woman juggling a dozen cases, barely objected. The judge, who, Sarah noticed, wore a golf club pin on his robe that matched one she'd seen in Tyler Harrington S.R.'s office window, set bail at the recommended amount. $10,000. Sarah would need $1,000 just for the bail bondsman, money she didn't have, money she couldn't get. She was led back to her cell, the reality settling over her like a heavy blanket. She'd be here until trial. She'd lose her jobs. She wouldn't be able to see her mother. The medical bills would pile up. Everything she'd been fighting for would slip away while she sat in this cell, punished for doing the right thing. The guard who led her back was older, a man named Roberts who had kind eyes. "You got someone you can call?" he asked quietly. "Family, friends." Sarah shook her head. Her mother couldn't know about this. The stress might kill her. She had no other family, no close friends. She'd kept everyone at arm's length since coming back from Afghanistan, unable to bridge the gap between who she'd been and who she'd become. "I'll be okay," she said, because that's what you said. That's what soldiers said. Roberts looked like he wanted to say something else, but another guard called him away. Sarah was alone again. An hour later, Roberts returned. His expression was carefully neutral. "Mitchell, you made bail." Sarah's head snapped up. "What? That's not possible. I didn't." "Someone posted it. You're free to go, pending trial." He unlocked the cell. There's a lawyer waiting for you in the visitor's room, says you have a meeting. Sarah's mind raced as she followed Roberts through the corridors. Who would have posted bail? Who even knew she was here? The visitor's room was small and windowless. Sitting at the table was a woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed and professional in a tailored suit. She stood when Sarah entered, extending her hand. Sarah Mitchell, I'm Margaret Chen, attorney at law. I've been retained to represent you. Sarah shook her hand slowly. I don't understand, I can't afford. Your fees have been covered by an anonymous benefactor, Margaret said smoothly. Someone who believes you've been wrongly accused and wants to ensure you receive proper legal representation. Who? I'm not at liberty to say, but I can tell you that I've reviewed the facts of your case, and I believe we have a strong defense. I've also filed a motion to have your bail conditions modified to allow you to continue working and caring for your mother. Sarah sat down heavily, her mind struggling to process this. Why would someone do this? I don't know anyone with that kind of money. Margaret's expression softened slightly. Sometimes, Sarah, people recognize when someone's been treated unjustly, and sometimes they decide to do something about it. She opened her briefcase, pulling out a folder. Now, let's talk about your case. I want to hear everything in your own words. For the next hour, Sarah recounted the events outside Murphy's diner. Margaret took notes, asked sharp questions, and occasionally smiled in a way that suggested she knew more than she was saying. When they finished, Margaret packed up her files. I'll be in touch within 48 hours. In the meantime, go see your mother, take care of yourself. And Sarah, she paused at the door. Don't lose hope. Justice doesn't always come easy, but it does come, sometimes from the most unexpected places. Sarah stepped out of the county jail into weak afternoon sunlight. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean and strangely bright. She felt unmoored, uncertain, like she'd stepped into someone else's life. A truck was parked across the street. A black Ford F-150, unremarkable except for the man leaning against it and the dog sitting at his feet. Their eyes met again, just as they had the night before through the rain-streaked window. This time, Sarah got a better look at him. Mid-30s, maybe, with close-cropped dark hair and the kind of stillness that came from extreme discipline. His eyes were blue-gray, the color of storm clouds, and they held an understanding that made Sarah's breath catch. The German shepherd beside him was magnificent, all muscle and intelligence, with a dark sable coat and alert, watchful eyes. As Sarah stood there, frozen, the dog's tail gave a single wag. The man straightened, gave her a small nod, not quite a salute, but something similar. A gesture of respect, soldier to soldier. Then he and the dog got into the truck and drove away, leaving Sarah standing on the courthouse steps, wondering who he was and why she felt like her life had just taken a turn she didn't understand. She pulled out her phone, called a cab she couldn't afford, and headed to the hospital to see her mother. But all the way there, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was no longer fighting this battle alone. Somewhere out there, someone was watching. Someone was helping. Someone understood. And for the first time since coming home from Afghanistan, Sarah Mitchell felt something she'd almost forgotten how to feel. She felt hope. The Riverside Medical Center smelled like antiseptic and false hope. Sarah walked through the familiar corridors toward her mother's room, her stomach tight with anxiety. She'd practiced what she'd say, how she'd explain being unreachable for 24 hours, but the lies felt heavy in her mouth. Ellen Mitchell was awake when Sarah entered, propped up against pillows, her once vibrant red hair now thin and gray. But her eyes, the same green as Sarah's, were still sharp, still seeing everything. "Baby girl," Ellen said, and her voice was weak but warm. "You look terrible." Sarah managed a smile, settling into the chair beside the bed. "Thanks, Mom. You really know how to make a girl feel special." "I know my daughter, and I know that. Look, what happened." Sarah had never been able to lie to her mother. Not successfully, anyway. So she told her, keeping her voice steady, downplaying the severity, emphasizing that she had a good lawyer now, that everything would be fine. Ellen listened without interrupting, her fingers picking at the hospital BL. Ankit, when Sarah finished, there was a long silence. "Your father would be proud," Ellen finally said. Sarah blinked. "Mom, I got arrested." "You stood up for someone who needed help. You did what was right, even though it cost you." Ellen reached for Sarah's hand, her grip weak but insistent. "That's what Tom always taught you. That's what makes you his daughter." Tears burned behind Sarah's eyes, but she fought them back. I might lose everything, the jobs, the money we need for your treatment. Sarah Ann Mitchell, you listen to me. Ellen's voice gained strength, the commanding tone of the woman who'd raised Sarah alone while Tom Mitchell served overseas. Money comes and goes, jobs come and go, but integrity, that's forever. You did the right thing and I won't have you questioning that. You understand? Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Now, Ellen continued, settling back against her pillows, tell me about this mysterious benefactor who hired you a fancy lawyer. I don't know who it is, the lawyer won't say. Ellen's eyes gleamed with something that might have been mischief. Well, isn't that interesting? James Reeves spent the next 3 days doing what he did best, reconnaissance. He moved through Riverside like a ghost, Ajax at his side, gathering information and building a picture of the corruption that had allowed Tyler Harrington to operate with impunity. He talked to waitresses who'd served Tyler and heard stories that made his jaw clench. He spoke to former classmates who remembered Chelsea Morrison as a bright, confident girl before Tyler had gotten his hooks in her. He interviewed bar owners who'd been pressured to destroy security footage after Tyler's DUIs. And he watched Tyler swagger through town like he owned it, which in many ways he did. He watched Chief Morrison work late hours, his face drawn with worry. He watched Chelsea go through the motions of her life with dead eyes and careful movements, like someone walking on broken glass. Ajax noticed things too. The dog was trained for combat, but he had instincts that went beyond training. He'd growl low in his throat when Tyler passed by, his hackles rising. He'd whine softly when they saw Chelsea, sensing her fear and pain. I know, buddy, James would murmur. I know. On the 4th day, James made contact with Sarah directly. He was waiting in the parking lot when she finished her shift at the warehouse where she worked nights, packing boxes for minimum wage. She approached his truck cautiously, recognizing him immediately. Ajax sat in the passenger seat, watching her with those intelligent eyes. You're the guy from the diner, Sarah said, and the courthouse. James Reeves. He didn't offer his hand, sensing she wouldn't take it. I saw what happened that night. I know you're innocent. Sarah's expression hardened. Did you hire the lawyer? I know someone who knows someone. Does it matter? Yes, it matters. I don't need charity. I don't need. You need justice? James interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. And right now, you're not going to get it through the official channels. Tyler Harrington has this town sewn up tight. The police chief is his girlfriend's father. The judge plays golf with his dad. The prosecutor is trying to make a name for himself by convicting a veteran. Sarah crossed her arms, her body language defensive. And what are you? Some kind of white knight here to save me. I'm someone who recognizes injustice when I see it. I'm someone who has the skills and resources to help. James paused. I'm someone who knows what it's like to serve your country and come home to find that the things you fought for don't always apply to you. That hit home. Sarah's expression shifted, the hardness cracking slightly. What are you exactly? Some kind of cop. Former Navy SEAL, 15 years. Ajax here was my team's K9. He glanced at the dog, who responded with a tail wag. We're both retired now, trying to figure out civilian life. Sarah studied him for a long moment. Why do you care about my case? Because I saw a soldier do the right thing and get punished for it. Because I'm tired of watching people like Tyler Harrington get away with hurting people. Because, he trailed off, then decided to be honest. Because my last partner died in my arms during an op that went wrong because someone up the chain lied to save their own career. I couldn't get justice for him. Maybe I can help you get it for yourself. The vulnerability in that confession seemed to reach Sarah in a way nothing else had. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. What did you have in mind? She asked. Over the next week, Sarah and James formed an unlikely alliance. He taught her how to gather evidence, how to document everything, how to think like an operator planning a mission instead of a victim waiting for the system to work. Margaret Chen worked the lay. Gal angles, filing motions, demanding discovery, pushing the prosecutor at every turn. She was good, scary good, and Sarah began to understand that whoever had hired her had connections that went deep. Ajax became a regular presence too. The dog had a way of knowing when Sarah needed comfort, would press his solid warmth against her leg when the stress got too high. She'd never been much of a dog person, but Ajax was different. He was a warrior just like her, just like James. He understood. They discovered that Murphy's diner had external cameras that covered the alley. The footage would show everything: Tyler hurting Chelsea, Sarah intervening appropriately, Tyler's aggressive response. But when they requested it through official channels, they were told the system had malfunctioned that night. James smiled when he heard that. Of course it did. That night, he and Ajax paid a visit to Murphy's diner. The owner, an older man named Frank Murphy who'd served in Vietnam, was only too happy to help once James explained the situation. "I kept a backup," Frank admitted, pulling out a thumb drive. "Something told me this was going to be trouble. I heard what happened to that Mitchell girl. Her father used to come in here every Sunday for breakfast. Good man. She deserves better than what she's getting." The footage was crystal clear. It showed everything exactly as Sarah had described. Tyler Harrington assaulting his girlfriend, Sarah intervening with minimal force, Tyler's rage and false accusations. James made copies, lots of copies, just in case. But when Margaret tried to submit the evidence, the prosecutor filed a motion to suppress it, claiming it was obtained improperly. The judge, Tyler's father's golfing buddy, agreed. "They're closing ranks," Margaret told Sarah and James at a coffee shop across from the courthouse. "This is bigger than just one case. They're protecting their own." Sarah felt despair creeping back in. "So what do we do?" James and Margaret exchanged a look. Ajax, lying under the table, lifted his head and looked at James with an expression that seemed almost knowing. "We go to war," James said quietly. "We stop playing by their rules and start playing by ours." Sarah frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means we build a case so airtight, so public that they can't bury it. We expose everything, not just what happened to you, but Tyler's whole pattern of behavior. We bring the media in. We make enough noise that they can't ignore it." "That could backfire," Margaret warned. "If we push too hard, they might push back harder. Tyler's father has resources we can't match." "Maybe," James said, "but I've got something they don't." "What's that?" James smiled, and there was something dangerous in it. The truth, and the will to fight for it. Ajax let out a soft bark of agreement. Sarah looked between them. This lawyer who fought like a warrior, this seal who understood justice, this dog who seemed to carry wisdom in his dark eyes. She thought about her mother in that hospital bed, about 6 years of honorable service, about all the times she'd stood up when it would have been easier to stand down. "Okay," she said, "let's do it, let's go to war." That night, Sarah lay in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the town outside her window. Somewhere out there, Tyler Harrington was sleeping soundly, confident in his protection, certain that his money and name would shield him from consequences. He had no idea what was coming. None of them did. Because Sarah Mitchell had survived firefights in Afghanistan. She'd held the line when others fell. She'd learned that sometimes the only way to win was to refuse to give up, to keep fighting when everyone said you were beaten. And now she had allies, a lawyer who wouldn't quit, a seal who understood war, and a dog who'd proven time and again that loyalty and courage came in all forms. The storm was gathering. And soon, very soon, it would break over Riverside like nothing this quiet town had ever seen. The first crack in Tyler Harrington's armor came from an unexpected source, Chelsea Morrison herself. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after Sarah's arrest. James had been conducting surveillance, though he'd never call it that in civilian life, and had noticed Chelsea's routine. Every Tuesday, she volunteered at the county animal shelter, one of the few times she seemed to be out from under Tyler's watchful eye. James didn't plan it exactly, but when Ajax needed to walk past the shelter, and when Chelsea happened to be outside in the play yard with a group of rescue dogs, it seemed like fate. Ajax, who'd been trained to remain focused in combat zones, immediately pulled toward the fence, his tail wagging. One of the shelter dogs, a scarred pit bull mix, came to meet him, and the two touched noses through the chain link. Chelsea laughed the first. Genuine sound James had heard from her. "Your dog is beautiful. What's his name?" "Ajax," James said, keeping his distance, keeping his tone neutral. "Yours." "This is Stella. She was a bait dog before we rescued her." Chelsea's hand ran gently over the pit bull's scarred ears. "People did terrible things to her, but she's still so sweet, still trusting." There was something in the way she said it, a recognition, a parallel she was drawing. James understood immediately. Chelsea knew what it was like to be hurt by someone you should have been able to trust. Some wounds run deep, James said carefully, but they can heal if you get away from what's hurting you. Chelsea's hand stilled. She looked up at him, really looked, and James saw her make the connection. She knew who he was. She'd seen him at the diner that night. "I can't," she whispered. "You don't understand. My father, Tyler's family, everyone expects." "Sarah Mitchell expects nothing from you," James said. "She intervened because it was right, not because she wanted something, but she's paying the price for it, and you're the only one who can tell the truth." Chelsea's eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared." "I know." James crouched down so they were at eye level through the fence. Ajax sat beside him, solid and calm. "I spent 15 years as a Navy SEAL. I've seen bravery in 1,000 forms, and you want to know what the bravest thing is? It's standing up when you're terrified. It's telling the truth when lying would be easier. It's choosing what's right over what's safe. What if no one believes me? What if I lose everything? What if you do nothing and lose yourself instead?" They sat in silence for a long moment, just the two of them and the dogs, while the weight of that question settled between them. Finally, Chelsea spoke, her voice barely audible. "If I talk to someone, if I tell what really happened, would it help her? Would it make a difference?" "Yes," James said simply. "It would change everything." Chelsea nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "Okay, tell me what to do." Margaret Chen was a professional. She'd handled hundreds of cases, seen every kind of witness, every kind of testimony. But even she seemed moved when Chelsea Morrison sat in her office 2 days later and told her story. Tyler had been abusive for months, verbal at first, then physical, grabbing too hard, pushing, once slapping her so hard it left a bruise she'd hidden with makeup for a week. Chelsea's father suspected but didn't want to know. The Harringtons were important to his career, to the town. It was easier to pretend everything was fine. The night at Murphy's diner, Tyler had been drinking and angry about something at work. He'd grabbed Chelsea in the alley, hurting her, telling her she was embarrassing him. Sarah Mitchell had intervened exactly as she'd claimed, professionally, minimally, protecting Chelsea. "Tyler told me to say I didn't see clearly," Chelsea said, her voice shaking. "He said if I contradicted him, he'd make sure everyone knew I was just a drunk girl causing drama. He said his family would destroy my father's career. I was scared, so I said I wasn't sure what happened." Margaret recorded every word, documented every detail. Then she did something unusual. She called a press conference. The Riverside Gazette was a small newspaper, barely more than a local rag, but its editor, a woman named Patricia Vance who'd been trying to expose the Harringtons' corruption for years, was hungry for a real story. When Margaret Chen walked into her office with Chelsea Morrison and a detailed affidavit, Patricia smiled like Christmas had come early. "I want to be clear," Margaret said. "This isn't just about Sarah Mitchell anymore. This is about a pattern of abuse enabled by wealth and protected by corruption. My client is willing to go on record. The question is, are you willing to print it?" Patricia's eyes gleamed. "Try and stop me." The story broke 2 days later. Front page above the fold. Local woman recants testimony in veteran assault case, alleges abuse and cover-up. Chelsea's face was in the photo, brave and terrified and determined. The article laid out everything: Tyler's history of violence, the suppressed evidence, the convenient malfunction of the security cameras, the judge's connections to the Harrington family. By noon, the story had been picked up by the Richmond Times-Dispatch. By evening, it was on the Virginia State News. By the next morning, it had gone viral on social media. Riverside exploded. Tyler Harrington, SR, called an emergency meeting at his mansion on the hill overlooking the town. His son sat across from him, looking petulant and scared in equal measure. "How bad is this?" Tyler Jr. asked. "Bad," his father admitted. "That Morrison girl gave them everything. The media is camped outside the courthouse. The state attorney, Jenner. Al's office is asking questions. Even our friends are distancing themselves. So fix it, that's what you always do." Tyler SR looked at his son with something that might have been disappointment. "I can't fix stupid, boy. You should have left that girl alone. You should have kept your hands to yourself. And you definitely shouldn't have gone after a veteran with 2 bronze stars." "So what, we just let them win?" "No," Tyler SR said slowly. "We lawyer up, we fight this in court. And you," he pointed a finger at his son, You stay out of sight until this blows over, no statements, no social media, nothing. But Tyler Jr. had never been good at following directions. Sarah first heard about Chelsea's testimony from James, who called her while she was at the hospital with her mother. "It's happening," he said simply. "Chelsea came forward, the story's everywhere, your lawyer is fielding calls from every news outlet in the state." Sarah sat down heavily in the hospital corridor, her legs suddenly weak. She really did it, she told the truth. She did, and Sarah, there's more. The state attorney general is opening an investigation into the Riverside Police Department. Chief Morrison is on administrative leave. The judge recused himself from your case. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. Not tears of sadness this time, but of relief so profound it was almost painful. "We're winning," she whispered. "Not yet," James cautioned. "The Harringtons have resources, they'll fight back, but we've got momentum now, we've got the truth on our side." "How can I ever thank you? You and Ajax and Margaret, you saved me." There was a pause on the line. "Thank me by staying strong, this isn't over yet." He was right, it wasn't over. Because that night, Tyler Harrington Jr. got drunk, got angry, and made a decision that would change everything. He was going to make them all pay. Starting with the one person who'd started this whole mess, Sarah Mitchell. Ajax was the first to sense something wrong. The dog woke James at 2 a.m., whining and pacing, his hackles raised. James had learned to trust his K9's instincts. They'd saved his life more than once in Afghanistan. "What is it, boy?" James asked, already reaching for his phone. Ajax went to the door, scratching at it, his whole body tense with urgency. James made a decision based on pure instinct. He called Sarah's number. It rang and rang, going to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. "Gear up," James told Ajax, already moving. The dog knew what that meant. They were going operational. As James drove through the dark streets of Riverside, Ajax sitting alert in the passenger seat, a sense of dread settled over him. He'd felt this before, in the minutes before an ambush, in the seconds before everything went wrong. Something bad was happening, and they were running out of time to stop it. Sarah woke to the sound of breaking glass. For a split second, still caught in the fog of sleep, she thought she was back in Afghanistan, that the compound was under attack. Then reality crashed in. She was in her apartment in Riverside, and someone had just broken her window. She rolled out of bed, her combat training taking over, her mind going cold and clear the way it always did in danger. She heard footsteps in her living room, heavy and unsteady. One person moving clumsily, drunk or high or both. "Sarah Mitchell," Tyler Harrington's voice was slurred and furious. "Come out here, we need to talk." Sarah grabbed her phone from the nightstand, but Tyler's next words stopped her. "I know you're calling someone. I cut your phone line, and I'm not leaving until you understand what you've done to me." Something crashed, her coffee table maybe. More footsteps getting closer to her bedroom. Sarah's mind raced through her options. Her apartment was on the second floor, no easy way out the bedroom window. Tyler was between her and the front door. She was trained in hand-to-hand combat, but that training came with rules of engagement, and right now, any physical confrontation would be twisted against her just like the last one. She was trapped. "My whole life is ruined because of you," Tyler was shouting now, his voice raw with alcohol and rage. "Chelsea left me, the company fired me, everyone in town is looking at me like I'm nothing, all because you couldn't mind your own business." Sarah heard her bedroom door crash open. Tyler stood there, silhouetted in the light from the living room, swaying slightly. He had something in his hand, a baseball bat. "I'm going to make you understand," he said, taking a step toward her. "I'm going to make you pay for what you did." Sarah raised her hands, keeping her voice calm and steady despite the fear flooding through her. "Tyler, you need to leave, right now. This is breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon. You're making everything worse." "Worse," he laughed, a bitter sound. "How could it possibly be worse? You've destroyed everything." He raised the bat. Sarah tensed, ready to fight, ready to defend herself, knowing that no matter what happened next, it would probably end with her in handcuffs again, because that's how this worked in Tyler Harrington's world. Then a sound cut through the tension, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the walls. Tyler froze. What the hell? Ajax came through the window like a shadow made solid, glass crunching under his paws. 75 pounds of trained combat K9 moving with lethal precision. The dog didn't attack. SEALs trained their K9s to be precise, controlled. But he placed himself between Sarah and Tyler, his teeth bared, that growl building to something that promised violence if needed. "Good boy," James Reeves said, appearing in the bedroom doorway behind Tyler. He was calm, controlled, but there was something dangerous in his eyes. "Ajax, hold." The dog maintained his position, every muscle coiled and ready. Tyler spun around, the bat still in his hand, his face flushed with alcohol and fear. "You can't be here. This is private property. I'll have you arrested." "You broke into this woman's home with a weapon," James said evenly. "I'm a witness to assault with a deadly weapon. Drop the bat now." For a moment it could have gone either way. Tyler was drunk enough to be stupid, angry enough to be dangerous. But Ajax's growl deepened, and something in James's posture, the stillness of a predator before it strikes, made Tyler reconsider. The bat clattered to the floor. "Good choice," James said. He pulled out his phone, never taking his eyes off Tyler. "This is James Reeves. I'm at 425 Maple Street, apartment 2B. I need police, and I need them now. I've just stopped an attempted assault in progress. The perpetrator is Tyler Harrington, III." The police arrived within minutes. Not the officers who'd arrested Sarah, but state police who'd been assigned to Riverside as part of the Attorney General's investigation. They took Tyler into custody, read him his rights, documented the broken window and the baseball bat and the terror in Sarah's eyes that she couldn't quite hide. James gave his statement with military precision, detailing everything he'd witnessed. Ajax sat at his side, calm now but still watchful, still ready. Sarah sat on her couch, wrapped in a blanket someone had brought her, watching it all unfold with a sense of unreality. This was supposed to be Tyler's world, where he always won, where money and connections protected him from consequences. But looking at him now, handcuffed, drunk, his designer clothes disheveled, being led to a police car while cameras flashed from the news crews that had arrived, she saw him for what he really was. Not a powerful man, just a scared boy who'd finally run out of people willing to protect him from his own choices. One of the state police officers, a woman named Detective Lisa Ramirez, sat down beside Sarah. "Ms. Mitchell, I want you to know that the charges against you are being dropped. The prosecutor filed the motion this afternoon, before this incident. Chelsea Morrison's testimony and the security footage we recovered made it clear you acted in defense of another. I'm sorry it took so long for the truth to come out." Sarah nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. "Tyler Harrington will be charged with breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, and stalking. Given his family's connections, we're requesting he be held without bail as a flight risk. The judge has already signed off." "A different judge," Sarah managed to say. Detective Ramirez smiled grimly. "Judge Morrison recused himself from anything involving the Harringtons after his daughter came forward. The new judge doesn't play golf with anyone in this town. He's from Richmond, specifically assigned to ensure fairness." After the police left, after the news crews were pushed back, after the apartment manager promised to fix the window first thing in the morning, Sarah was alone with James and Ajax. "How did you know?" she asked. "How did you know to come?" James looked at Ajax, who sat at attention between them. "He knew. He woke me up, wouldn't settle until we came here. Dogs have instincts we don't understand. Ajax served with me through 6 deployments. When he says something's wrong, I listen." Sarah knelt down, looked into Ajax's intelligent dark eyes. The dog's tail wagged once, and then he pressed his head against her hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "Both of you, you saved my life." "You saved your own life," James corrected. "You stayed calm, you handled the situation correctly. Ajax and I just made sure the truth was witnessed." Sarah stood, wiping at her eyes. "I don't know how to repay this, any of this, the lawyer, the bail, tonight." "There's no debt," James said quietly. "This is what we do. We protect people who can't protect themselves. We stand up for what's right even when it's hard." He paused. "It's what you did that night outside Murphy's diner. You saw someone who needed help and you helped. Everything that came after, that was just the cost of doing the right thing." "Some cost," Sarah said, but she was smiling through her tears. The trial, when it finally happened 3 months later, was almost anticlimactic. Tyler Harrington III pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. His father's lawyers fought hard, but the evidence was overwhelming, the media attention too intense, the political will to hold him accountable too strong. Chelsea Morrison testified about years of abuse. Other women came forward with their own stories. The pattern was undeniable. Tyler was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with mandatory counseling for domestic violence and substance abuse. It wasn't enough, maybe, but it was something. It was justice, imperfect and incomplete, but real. The charges against Sarah were formally dismissed with prejudice, meaning they could never be refiled. Her record was expunged. The town of Riverside offered her a formal apology and a settlement that covered her legal fees and then some. Chief Morrison resigned. Judge Henderson was censured by the state judicial board and quietly retired. The corruption that had protected Tyler Harrington's abuse for years was exposed and slowly, painfully being cleaned out. Sarah's mother lived to see her daughter vindicated. Ellen Mitchell passed away 6 months after the trial peacefully, with Sarah holding her hand. The experimental treatment had bought them extra time they'd spent together, time Sarah would treasure forever. "You did it, baby girl," Ellen had whispered near the end. "You stood up, you didn't quit, your father would be so proud." Sarah thought about that often in the months that followed, about standing up, about not quitting, about the cost of doing the right thing and the price of letting wrong go unchallenged. 1 year after that night outside Murphy's diner, Sarah stood in a very different place. She'd used the settlement money to go back to school, to get her paramedic certification, to start building a life that felt like hers instead of just surviving. She worked now for the county emergency services, helping people, using her combat medic training in a way that felt right. She'd even started volunteering at the Veterans Support Group, where she'd first crossed paths with James and Ajax. "Speaking of which..." "You're late," she called out, seeing the familiar truck pull into the parking lot outside the community center. James climbed out, Ajax bounding ahead of him, tail wagging. The dog had become a fixture at the support group, providing the kind of comfort and understanding that only an animal who'd served could give. "Traffic," James said, though they both knew that was a lie. James Reeves was never late for anything. Sarah knelt down to greet Ajax, who licked her face enthusiastically. "Missed you too, buddy." "He's not the only one," James said, so quietly she almost missed it. Sarah looked up, meeting his eyes. Over the past year, they'd become friends. More than friends, maybe, though neither of them had been ready to name it. 2 warriors learning to be civilians again, learning to trust, learning that the hard things they'd survived didn't have to define them forever. "Reeves," she said, standing up, "are you flirting with me?" "Depends, is it working?" She laughed, surprising herself. A year ago, she hadn't thought she'd ever laugh again. "Maybe, buy me coffee after group and we'll see." "It's a date." Inside, the support group was gathering, men and women who'd served, who understood things that couldn't be explained to anyone who hadn't been there. They talked about the hard stuff, the nightmares, the hypervigilance, the feeling of being out of place in the world they'd sworn to protect. But they also talked about hope, about healing, about the small victories and the slow progress and the people who stood by them when things got dark. Sarah shared her story that night. Not all of it. Some parts were still too raw, too personal. But she talked about standing up for what was right, about the price it had cost, and about the unexpected allies who'd helped her when she'd been ready to give up. "I learned something this past year," she said, looking around the circle at these brave, broken, healing people. "I learned that justice doesn't always come easy. Sometimes you have to fight for it. Sometimes it costs more than you want to pay, but it's worth it. Standing up is worth it. Doing the right thing is worth it." She paused, her hand dropping to Ajax's head. The dog leaned into her touch, solid and warm and real. "And I learned that you don't have to fight alone. Sometimes help me's from unexpected places. Sometimes it comes with 4 legs and a tail." Laughter rippled through the group. "And sometimes it comes from people who understand what it means to serve, to sacrifice, to stand up when standing up is the hardest thing you can do." After the meeting, Sarah and James walked to the coffee shop down the street, Ajax trotting between them. It was a cool November evening, the kind that promised winter was coming, but the air felt clean and fresh and full of possibility. "You did good tonight," James said. "Sharing your story, that took courage." "I had a good teacher," Sarah replied. "Someone showed me that courage isn't about not being scared, it's about doing what's right anyway." They ordered their coffee and sat outside at a small table, watching the town move around them. Riverside looked different to Sarah now. Still small, still quiet, but not quite as suffocating. People looked at her differently too, with respect instead of pity, with admiration instead of dismissal. She'd proven something to them, but more importantly, she'd proven something to herself. She was strong enough to stand up. She was strong enough to fight back. She was strong enough to win. "I've been thinking," James said, pulling her from her thoughts, "about what comes next." "Yeah. Ajax and we've been doing some work with the state police. Training programs for K-9 units, consulting on cases involving military veterans. It's good work. Meaningful." "That sounds perfect for you guys." "I think it could be perfect for 3. Sarah looked at him, understanding dawning. "You're offering me a job." "Partnership, actually. Your combat medic experience, your understanding of PTSD and veteran issues, your ability to connect with people who have served, it would make the program stronger. And," he added with a small smile, "Ajax likes you. That's pretty much the highest recommendation I can give." Sarah looked down at the dog, who gazed back at her with those knowing eyes. Then she looked at James, this man who'd stood in the shadows, who'd fought for justice when no one else would, who'd shown her that not everyone with power used it to hurt people. She thought about her father, who'd taught her to stand up for what was right. About her mother, who'd told her that integrity was forever. About the 6 years she'd spent in the army, trying to make a difference, trying to matter. She thought about Tyler Harrington sitting in a prison cell, finally facing consequences for his actions. About Chelsea Morrison, who'd found the courage to tell the truth and was now in therapy, slowly rebuilding her life. About a small town in Virginia that was learning, painfully, that justice sometimes required fighting for it. And she thought about second chances, about finding purpose after loss, about warriors finding their way home, not to a place but to a mission, to each other, to the work that mattered. "When do I start?" she asked. James smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. "How about Monday?" Ajax barked once, sharp and approving. "I think that's a yes from the decision-maker," Sarah laughed. They sat there as the evening deepened into night, making plans, talking about the future, while around them Riverside settled into its familiar rhythms. Somewhere in this town, people were struggling with injustice. Somewhere, someone needed help but was too afraid to ask for it. Somewhere, the strong were preying on the weak, confident they'd never face consequences. But now, watching over it all, were 3 warriors who knew what it meant to fight for what was right. A combat medic who'd learned that standing up was worth the cost. A Navy SEAL who'd found a new mission worth fighting for. And a K-9 who'd proven, time and again, that the most powerful weapon in the fight for justice wasn't strength or money or connections. It was loyalty, it was courage. It was the willingness to stand in the gap when someone needed protection, regardless of the personal cost. Sarah Mitchell had come home from Afghanistan believing she'd lost her purpose, her place in the world. She'd been wrong. Sometimes the fight doesn't end when you take off the uniform. Sometimes it's just beginning. And sometimes the battles you win at home, the stands you take for justice, for truth, for the person being hurt in the alley behind a diner, those are the ones that matter most. She reached down and scratched Ajax behind his ears. The dog leaned into her touch, content, and Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. With exactly the people and dog she was meant to fight alongside. The storm had passed, the battle was won. But the war for justice, for doing what's right, for standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves, that war never ends. And Sarah Mitchell, James Ray, Eves and Ajax, they were ready for whatever came next. Together,